this deep, warm wash, almost like wind coming from inside my body.
Wow.
And the words not yet, almost like they were implanted in me. Not in my voice, not in anything I recognize, just not yet. And I recognize that immediately as the peace that I'm seeking will happen, but not yet.
Mm.
Now's not the time.
Hey, Soul Family. Welcome to the Alive and Awake podcast. I'm your host, Alicia Kay, and I have spent the last 20 years teaching people how to work with their wounds and overcome their greatest fears so they can learn how to thrive in a world where they were only taught to conform. Each week, we will dive deep into the practical, the spiritual, and the mystical so I can teach you how to do the inner work to know yourself, trust yourself, and eventually love yourself enough to create a world where you feel fully alive, awake, and free. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and never miss an episode. Ready? Let's dive in.
Welcome to another episode, everyone. I am here with my mentor, buddy, and spiritual teacher, Kyle Kingsbury. He has lived many, many lives. He is a retired pro UFC fighter. He played football at Arizona State and got into a bunch of shenanigans. But now he really is an amazing father of two, husband, friend, and the embodiment of one of the most divine masculine men that I have ever had the pleasure to not only know personally, but to really help me rise and break through my own walls around the masculine. I met Kyle individually and personally at an event called Full Temple Reset that he takes everyone through a 5-day fast detox and really helps people learn how to optimize their body to be an open channel for their intuition and to rise mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And being hugged by Kyle was absolutely incredible. I had no idea how many walls I had around my nervous system until I was in his presence. I was raised by a mom that told me to never need a man, never rely on a man, definitely never depend on a man. And so when I was literally hugged by his big bare arms, I just felt my whole self relax in a way that I was like, wow, I had no idea how guarded I really was. And so I just thank you for doing your own inner work to feel safe for the feminine, and whoever really is in your presence. So I would love to hear a little bit, Kyle, about the 3 stages of your life, right? You obviously went through some wounding, how you were raised, what you had to overcome, and really what got you on the path that you're on now to doing such deep, deep work with the people
Yeah,
that you touch.
I'm excited to dive in, and thank you for the amazing intro. That's probably the best intro I've ever received being a guest on a podcast. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Got it.
Um, let's see where to start here. It's funny because I got to do a webinar tomorrow on this, and Gazi and I have been working together. Gazi's my cohort, one of the 4 main coaches in Fit for Service, but also we're just the tandem duo for Full Temple Reset. And so he's been working with me, helping me get this webinar ready and everything. And the first part of it, storytelling. So we're going to talk about the 3 lives that I've lived. And when he first ran this through, it was 4 hours long. And then he had to cut it in half, and he did it
In
like
Gazi
3 times. He's
fashion.
like, yeah, Gazi's like, you just gotta actually do it, that we can see how long you're going to talk, and then you'll intuitively know what to cut out and what's necessary. So, anyways, I got to keep it to 15 to 20 minutes. So I won't make this 15 or 20 minutes. That way we have plenty of time to talk about other good stuff. But the 3 lives in short are what Godzi calls a sporadic savage. That was the first life. So when I grew up, it's a pretty violent household, not physically, but verbally, like learning everything I've learned about nonviolent communication, these kind of things. It was the exact opposite of that. I had 2 Rams for parents, and neither one of them could say sorry until it was too late. And they just butted heads constantly. I walked around on eggshells. I had a little sister who's a year younger than me. That's when I talk about with that podcast with Peter Crone. That's the part that cracks me open, having her sitting across her from the table. It wasn't just me in there experiencing that. And so that made life rather hard to deal with. And I found football at 8 years old, and that was like my pressure release valve. I could blow off steam, and I had, unfortunately, the game was different then. Like I remember my Pop Warner coach is saying, grab grass and put your face mask on him. So we'd literally get on all fours as an 8-year-old with a mouthpiece in and smash helmets face to face over and over again for minutes just to warm up our necks and our bodies.
Oh my gosh. That gives
They
me a
don't
little
do that
hope for
now.
my kid that wants to play football now. Avid. I'm like, oh gosh.
They do
Okay.
not do that anymore. That's for sure.
No.
But that was exactly what I needed,
Mhm.
and I loved football because of how physical it was. It was, what's the word for it? It's, I'm trying to think of the word for it, where it's like constructed violence is basically what
Mm.
it is. Like you have a container where violence is okay. And I fucking needed that as a kid big time. And I got into fights quite a bit growing up. Interestingly enough, I talked about this with a therapist years later. I was like, fighting was the only time where I was calm, where I
Mm.
was 100% still. And it was before words like flow stage had come along or any of this stuff, flow state. And really thinking back to that, my life was so chaotic and I did so poorly in school. I didn't want to be there, and looking at school now and how we raise our kids. I don't know if we'll get into that, but like I'm way off that wagon. I'm not into public school education or any of that shit that I got raised with, but it makes sense why I couldn't sit still. It made sense why I, wanted to rebel against everything. And football was the thing that really helped me there. And when I'd fight, it was fairly often. We didn't have zero tolerance policies until high school. So like from 6 years old up until 15, you could scrap, and not get in that big of trouble for it. You could go down the street off campus and whoop the crap out of each other. And most of the time I was running away from people. I wasn't standing in my ground and fighting, but often enough I'd stand my ground and fight. And I always felt a sense of peace when I did that.
Did
Football
you
took me
also,
to, go
oh, go
ahead.
ahead. I was going to say, did you also feel like power? Like I remember I had a super aggressive part of me where it was when I became old enough to protect myself or protect the people I loved, it was like no one was going to fuck with me or anybody that I loved. Like, so there was a sense of power that almost hid the helplessness or the powerlessness that like my inner child was carrying, right? So if I could do that, if I could protect myself, right, or protect the people I love, so I thought at that time, it actually made me feel um like I wasn't weak.
Yeah, there's a safety net in realizing your own power for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
The Vikings called that the berserker, and they would
Mm.
they would drink, mushrooms and different things to put them into an altered state of consciousness and literally tap into that power
Mm.
before, raping and ravaging and fucking doing the whole thing. So there is something to that, and I didn't have any terminology like this when I was going through it. No archetypes or mythology to work with. I just felt it, and I got it firsthand. So I know exactly what
Yeah.
you're speaking of. And but football was my main joy. Football, I did everything for football. I trained a little bit in mixed martial arts as a 17 and 8-year-old or 18-year-old, but just to make me better at football and just in case I got in another street fight. So get to ASU, was a walk-on after junior college, and really just wanted to play pro. But I knew that started. You got to play Division I football, and ended up sitting the bench there. And the longer I sat the bench, the more I realized my dreams of playing pro were gone. And so
Mm.
senior year, I had a lot to really chew on. One, I hadn't dealt with anything from my childhood. Two, I hadn't been introduced to plant medicines or any real work on the interior. And three, I was about to lose the only thing I gave a shit about, my only pressure release valve.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so when football ended, I, being at the number one party school in the nation, had access to all the street drugs, MDMA, Coke, you name it. Thankfully, never got involved with heroin or meth. I've lost like a handful of buddies to both those drugs, so I'm very grateful. Never got introduced to that stuff, but I partied hard with all the boys. I partied, I had a lot of friends on the team, guys that were, top 10 in the country, guys that were going to go on to play professional football. And it felt really good having the respect of everyone on the team. But when football ended, I had changed my degree so many times to stay eligible that I had now a bachelor in interdisciplinary studies, which is basically two minors to equal one major. And I had taken all the classes on psychology and communication and sociology that I could for my two minors to equal one major. And all that was left was BIS courses where I had to pretty much talk to somebody and write my own resume on why the two minors was better than one major.
Mm.
And I didn't fucking believe that. I didn't believe it was better than
Wow.
one. I mean, the truth
Wow.
was I tried to stay eligible for football It's the only reason I went to school. And I knew my major was a basket weaving major. I didn't give a shit about that, and I didn't want to get hired anywhere that would require a dog shit degree like that. So I called my parents when football ended. I told them, hey, I'm done. At least for a semester, I need a break. And against everyone's wishes, I said, I'm taking a break for a semester. And in that semester, I continued doing street drugs, staying out late. At the same time, I'd found a naturopathic doctor of all places who would prescribe me anything I wanted. So I had Vicodin, I had Xanax, and I had Valium. And this was like the strongest dose of each of these. It wasn't like the tiny bit. These were 2 milligram Xanny bars. If anyone remembers these, they looked like Pez. They had 4 squares, and one of those would fry your ass for like 36 hours. So, and I told him, I was like, yeah, I'm doing coke and can't sleep at night. Can you give me something for that? And he gave me Xanax.
Oh my
That guy ended up going to jail. He caused, I'm smiling right now, but one of my buddies died from an overdose from his prescription. So, I'm pointing all this out because I was on a path and a road that was leading me straight into a shithole, and I had no idea it was coming. And, I got in a big fight with my girlfriend at the time and basically felt like I'd never be loved, had no idea what was missing in my life, had no idea to get it back, and hit rock bottom. So I took every pill I had in my medicine cabinet, every pill that was left of the Vicodin with Tylenol, and the Tylenol is probably more deadly than the Vicodin. Every pill of the Xanax, every pill of the Valium. I drove up to the top of parking lot 7 and I got ready to jump. I stripped down naked and got ready to jump. And at that time, it's like 3:30 a.m. A guard had seen me pull into the parking lot, thought it was suspicious, and drove up to follow me. Well, I stripped down naked and I climbed up to this little ladder to stand on the very edge and jump. And when I did, I could feel, one last prayer. I didn't pray often, but I made one last prayer just saying, thank you, I'm ready. And I felt this deep, warm wash, almost like wind coming from inside my body.
Wow.
And the words, not yet, almost like they were implanted in me. Not in my voice, not in anything I recognize, just not yet. And I recognized that immediately as the peace that I'm seeking will happen, but not yet. Now's not the time. And right as I realized that, just wash of tears, and I heard, hey man, oh shit, you're naked. I immediately got pulled back in the 3D. I glanced down, I see this guy looking up at me, and I'm like, oh, yep, I am naked. Well, let me throw my robe on and I'll come down. And I came down, I told him what I was up to, what I was trying to do, and then I'd taken a whole bunch of stuff. I'm like, hey, I feel fine now, but I still could die from the amount of shit that I put in my body. So he had called 911. Cops rushed me to the hospital. I woke up about 36 hours later, and all my family was there from California, and I couldn't put the dots together. I was like, "Hey, mom, dad, sister, you're all here. This is amazing." And they're like, "Do you know what happened?" And I was like, "I don't know how I got here." And I was like, "Well, oh yeah, I was going to kill myself, and I took a bunch of pills. That's why you guys are here." All right.
Wow.
And 2 things really happened at that point that changed me forever. One was, I stayed in the hospital for a week. There was expert level therapists there. And so, they do group counseling. And one of the things they said is, you can tell your parents anything. You're in a safe space to do that. I encourage you to do that, but don't expect anything from it. Don't expect the sorry, an apology, or any of that shit, but say what needs to be said for you. So I got to do that. I got to talk about the hardest points of my life and how really, the pain of growing up. And there was denial. There's a whole bunch of shit. But again, it didn't matter because I got to say it and felt safe enough to say it. The second thing that happened was because I was alive now, it really felt like the end of A Christmas Carol, where he comes back from the Ghost of Christmas Future and he's like, holy shit, I'm alive, right? Like, what do I want to do now? And so for the first time in my life, the bubble of what I should be and what I should do popped. And I really had a chance. There was no rush either. I just sat down and I sat in nature a lot before I really had a connection to nature or a visceral one. And I just asked myself, what the fuck do I want to do? And I had no idea. And that was scary. So then I started to track, what am I missing right now that I used to have that made life enjoyable? And I knew being on a team did that. I didn't know how I'd get back on a team again. I knew being an athlete did that and pushing myself because it held me to a higher standard. I couldn't get shit-faced every night because I had practice the next day.
Right.
And so, the camaraderie of the team too, like going to 24-hour fitness alone after having trained with 100 guys, blasting music in $1 million place, $1 million strength room at Arizona State where no one else is allowed in there but the football team to go to lifting by myself. It felt like masturbation compared to sex. Like it was a night and day. I can't do that. And so I thought, how do I scrape this back? Maybe I'll start training mixed martial arts. I had no intentions of fighting. Trained for about 6 months in one gym. Didn't necessarily like the owners there. So I went to a new gym. It was the Rage in the Cage Training Center out in Phoenix. And the guy who ran that gym also ran a local promotion called Rage in the Cage. And, he looks at me and he's like, dude, you're tall, you're handsome, you're athletic. Fight for me at heavyweight. One pro fight. If it doesn't work out, you can say you fought pro once. And if it does, you can keep going. And I was like, that's a pretty good piece of bait you got there. Let me chew on that. And I thought about it and I was like, all right, I'm going to fucking do it.
Yeah.
So my first 2 fights, I won in under 30 seconds, just on what little I had learned in the 6 months and my athleticism. And I was like, all right, now I got to really see if I want to take this serious or not. And with that, the intention of taking it seriously, I ended up finding a new strength coach. I found a new striking coach who was a JKD guy named Vince Perez Mazzola. He trained under Dan Inosanto, who was Bruce Lee's protege for many years. And though that was my fucking team, basically. It was before there was a lot of fighters in Arizona and before the sport had taken off in the way that it has now. And because there's gyms all over the place now. In Phoenix, it would have been no problem training with great players, great fighters at that time. But at the time, it wasn't there. And so, a couple things happened along the way there. I was 7-0, took my first loss, and decided to move home to the Bay Area, where American Kickboxing Academy was one of the best gyms in the world. Cain Velasquez, who wrestled at ASU, he ended up moving back there to train. And my strength coach from ASU was like, don't dick around, move home, train with Cain if you want to take this far. And they already had several guys in the top 10. So it made sense to do that. At the same time, my strength coach had told me, he goes, you fought a lot. And I was like, I fart a lot? That's a weird thing to say to a dude, I was like, it's protein powder. He's like, no,
Maybe.
you got some kind of intolerance. And I was like, an intolerance to what, man? And so I got in an argument with him, and it's hilarious thinking back on it, because he asked me if I'd read a book, and I said, fuck no, I'm done with books. And I meant it. I was absolutely done with books. And he goes, will you watch a video? It's like, yeah, what's the name of the video? And he goes, Flatten Your Abs Forever by Paul Chek. And I was like, fuck yeah, man, I want to get shredded. I want to fucking, look like Andre Arlovsky up there. I want to flatten my abs forever. So I watched the video on VHS with Paul, and totally hoodwinked. It has nothing to do with being shredded. It has everything to do with the gut microbiome, soil quality, regenerative agriculture, intolerances, fucking you name it, right? It had to do with food.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was like, I was blown away by Paul's work. I said, I'll read that book. So I read How to Eat, Move, Be Healthy, found dinner elimination diet, found out I was gluten intolerant, found out I couldn't take in store-bought dairy. And just in that switch alone, I stopped getting sick. My recovery improved. My speed improved. I ended up getting a 6-pack. All the things that I fucking wanted from Flatten Your Abs Forever came to fruition from that. And the thing that Paul did for me, and since then, you of course know he's one of my mentors and one of my very best friends. That planted a seed not just on diet. It planted a seed for me to take care of myself, but it also planted a seed for me to learn. Because from one video and one book, if I could achieve that much just from that, I was like, what the fuck else are in the books that I haven't been told about? What else is out there that could be a difference maker? And when you're talking about championship fights and championship races, it's less than 1% is all it takes to be the difference between first and third, right? So like minuscule jumps can make you champion or not.
Sure. And I'll make sure to put that book in the show notes, because it does come with a super helpful quiz around how to eat and how, like, you definitely turned me on to it. It is a game changer when it comes to optimizing your health and actually feeling really good in your body by what you consume. So we'll definitely make sure that we put that down. There's no one right diet. If I could put it more plainly, there's no one right diet for anybody. Yeah. But by filling out these questionnaires, you can start to figure out what's right for you. Yeah. And so, with that, I moved back to AK. The next big thing that happened was I had a boxing coach come in about a year into it named Huitzi, which was short for Huitzilopochtli. He was a mestizo Aztec and Chicano Mexican. And he was a medicine man. And so he would take me and Cain and some of the fighters out for traditional sweat lodges before and after every fight camp, pretty much. And if somebody else had a big fight coming up, we'd go with them. So we were doing, if I fought 3 times a year, there was 6 just for me. Wow. But with the other guys going, we were there quite a bit. We were going every month at least to sweat. And after a couple of years, I said, Coach, when are we going to use La Medicina? Because I had heard enough of his experiences and stuff. And he just started laughing. He goes, I was waiting for you to ask, man. So we started working with psilocybin in the sweats. And
eventually with ayahuasca. And that, while I was fighting, set me on another path simultaneously. So, when football had ended, my whole life was in disarray. And I had a lot of baggage I was carrying with me, and I had all the wrong drugs and all the worst of Western medicine and all the least helpful practices, like staying up till 5 a.m., shit like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
What fighting gave me was, at least for 8 weeks when I was in fight camp, I was perfect. I would meditate, I'd do breath work, I'd ice bath, I'd hit my mobility, I would train within my means, try not to overdo it. And I'd eat perfect. Then after the fight, I still had my partying ways. I'd let loose, I'd have fun, I'd do some bad drugs, and I'd eat bad. And then, I kind of had this dichotomy,
Yeah.
and during fighting, I met my incredible wife to be, Natasha Kingsbury, who noticed this, that,
Mm. The
you're
pendulum
perfect
swinging
in
like
fight
from one
camp.
extreme
Yeah,
to the other.
exactly.
Oh, yeah,
She's
yeah, I
like,
know that
I
well.
don't understand, with how much you know about health and wellness and how much you're able to apply this in fight camp, how all bets are off when the fight ends. That
Oh,
can't be
yeah.
good for you. It can't be good for you long term, and it can't be good for your career right now. And she was right.
Yeah.
But it took more than me hearing that from her. It took me realizing that for myself. And thankfully, when I retired from fighting in the UFC in 2014, that was exactly what ayahuasca showed me. It showed me the pendulum swing, and it was visceral. I would feel the effects of too much alcohol come on, and I'd feel the effects of bad food come on, and I'd purge from that. And then I'd go back to feeling like a Zen master. And I'm like, fuck yeah, this is awesome. Okay, I get it. Nope, let's do it again. And for hours I'd swing back and forth until at the end, basically tapping out, I was like, okay, I've heard it. I've heard you.
Do you
And from that
feel?
moment on,
Oh,
I was just
go
going to
ahead.
say, from that moment on, I was still let loose every now and then. It took me years to fully say, fuck alcohol, fuck doing the wrong drugs. But that was a big shift. That 2014 was a huge shift.
Yeah, and and through my own trauma history and obviously all my training, I really in my own personal life realized that pendulum is the complete lack of structure that was provided in childhood, right? Like the lack of discipline, the lack of structure, the lack of like really good like embodied empathetic parental guidance. Like I did not have. And so I, unlike fighting, went into like bodybuilding and like super strict, super like, every workout, everything was like so calculated, and I craved that. But then in the off season was my time to just completely say fuck it and let loose, because it was literally like two extremes, right? And as you start, and at least my experience, when you start to actually do that deeper work, when you start to do that inner work, you no longer desire to have like that big shift, right? Because it's like, I love myself, I value myself, I want to treat my body well as the vessel that it is supposed to be and created to be, so that I feel more in balance and in alignment, where yeah, I enjoy good food, and I do still eat in a way that doesn't feel so restrictive that I want to like binge or purge. But I find a lot of people who are still learning to self-soothe with food, with alcohol, with those types of things. And that pendulum is always just swinging because of that unprocessed, undigested, emotional extremes that we used to go through when we were young.
I think it's twofold. I think there's on the one hand, there is the baggage, the unprocessed shit, that the only way we can do it is the way we know how. And alcohol is the world's drug outside of caffeine, right? I'm gonna caffeinate on the weekend, I'm gonna blow off steam with a 6-pack or whatever the choice is. So you got to process that. And that takes, many paths lead up the mountain. It could be breath work, it could be the darkness, it could be a vision quest with no food, no water for 4 days. But you got to enter into the altered state to reveal what you've been hiding from yourself. In addition to that, it really does help, especially for men, to have, what does this actually look like? What does the archetypical space look like? And that's where I think King, Warrior, Magician, Lover is so valuable, because you
That's a
learn
book, by the way.
on this cross, link to this in the show notes, is one of the books that changed my life. Mary Margrave made me read it in our very first call. I had it sitting on my fucking nightstand in the on deck position for 2 years, and kept saying no to it until I talked to her for the first time. She's like, do you have King, Warrior, Magician, Lover? I was like, it's on my nightstand in the #1 position. I keep passing it with other books. And she's like, you're going to read that now. And I was like, okay, cool. And if you think of the shape of a cross, you have the king at the top or queen at the top, and on the bottom you have the magician. Then east to west, you have the warrior and the lover. And people think, it shows you the good. There's a light side and a shadow side to every archetype. Most of us know shadow king, shadow warrior, thanks to our presidents and politicians and the military industrial complex. But there's a light side of these as well. And what's interesting is that if you have a shadow lover, So let's give a couple examples. Shadow lover is the addict. Shadow love, and that addict in all things: shopping addict, food addict, sex addict, alcohol, drug addict. All these are in the addict position as a shadow lover. Casanova, that archetype's in the shadow lover. They're not balanced by bettering the lover. They're balanced by the discipline of the warrior.
Yeah.
So you look to
absolutely.
balance these things across from each other. That's how the polarities work with one another.
Mm.
And I can see clearly that the time where I was forced to have discipline in my life, it was painfully easy to not even think about doing shit like that. I would never drink in fight camp. It would be suicide to go in and spar with Kane the next day after drinking the night before. I'd be a fucking death sentence.
Yeah.
I knew that even when I went to Thailand. I went to Thailand to train with my dad, and we went out having fun. I had a beer on Bangalore Road one night because I was training twice a day in the most humid environment I'd ever been in. And I was like, I'm here to learn. I'm not here to party. I'd love to party. You know, my dad had a few beers and he said it was like a bad idea when he did jujitsu the next day. So discipline helps balance that, right? And discipline equals
Yeah,
freedom. Like
absolutely.
Jocko says, it's a really true thing. But pure discipline is a warrior without love, and a warrior without love will be
Mm.
unsustainable as well, right? So we have to have these two things balancing each other. And
Absolutely.
thankfully, Tosh was that for me. You know, she really was. She was a game changer. I retired for a whole host of reasons that could be in its own podcast early. Got out at 32. Had been living in my mom's garage for 5 years. I bounced and bartended at a strip club. I was a personal trainer. I had a whole 3 jobs while fighting at the pinnacle, right? Like I didn't expect that to be the case, but that was the case.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I met a ride or die chick that was cool with living in the garage with me. And you know,
Oh
we
yeah.
started having visions of Bear. We had Bear together a year later after retiring, and that was kind of the next big moment, was becoming a dad. And so this phase from the sporadic savage had now shifted into more of a holistic lifestyle where,
Mm.
you know, stage 2 is I understand how to take care of myself. I have my kids, you know, at least my son at that point, and then little Wolfie came in 2020 to really look after and hold. And that holds me to a higher degree. Just like the fight held me to a certain level of discipline, I'd never want to be hungover in front of my kids again. Never in a fucking million years. There is nothing worth me. There's no party worth it for me to have to show up and be a shitty dad the next day or tired the next day because I had fun the night before. And so I learned that, you know, the hard way when my son was young. I was like, God, I can't do that. We got home from Burning Man one year, and for 2 weeks we were wrung out. And it was like, we're either not
It is
going back
the
to Burning Man
worst.
again, or we're not gonna,
Yeah,
we're
like
gonna
that
go there and be
feeling
sober. That's
is
it.
like, oh God. And then when that actually starts to came into my field was like, oh God, like it just reminded me of when I would my mom was a bartender at night. She was super young. She had me at 16. Like she had to make ends meet. But I just remember that feeling of like, oh my gosh, like I don't ever want my child to feel the way that I felt when I was young. Like that was
Yeah,
enough to change that, right? Like to be like, hell fucking no. That's not, there's no way I want to ever put that into his energy field.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So phase 2 lasted for a while. Phase 2 was great. I felt like my life was in order. I got hired at On It, director of human optimization. I was designing supplements, one of the largest supplement companies in the world. I took over their podcast, and I was kind of the office guinea pig. So I got to experiment with things like methylene blue, anything that works. I'd go to vitamin and supplement conferences twice a year with my buddy ETG, and I would try them out. I'd try out everything in various workouts. I'd give, you know, like Sasha Shulgin with drugs. I'd do this with supplements, where I had my inner circle with Primal Soldier and Juan and different professional athletes. And I'd say, try this shit in this combination pre-workout. Tell me what you think of it. And that was a lot of fun. And, you know, we started Fit for Service in 2017 or 2018. And that became kind of the next evolution of really thinking, how do I give this information back to people in a meaningful way?
Yeah.
And then 2020 hit, and 2020 hit like a fucking Mack truck. And, you know, there's some people, and this is not finger pointing at all, but there's still some people who wanted things to just to go back to normal no matter what, and pray that this is now the new normal.
Mm.
I didn't see it that way. What I saw was, and the more that I've uncovered, is that we don't go back to normal, and that whatever's coming, there's more coming. That 2020 is not the last of what we'll see. And really, when I started to check in on that, I was like, can I take care of my fucking kids if the power goes out? No. Where am I going to get water? Let me get a Berkey. Oh, Berkeys need pressure. Let me get a life straw. That doesn't need pressure. I can stick it in a pond or a pool, and I can give water to people for fucking 6 months on that. Like 30 people can have water, right? So I started looking into things like that, and I got into a bit of prepping, but really I wanted to apply everything that I learned from health and wellness viscerally. So I was participating in buying regenerative agriculture. I'd go out to farms and participate in a bison harvest. And my son would sit on my lap and we'd see the bison go down and pray for its body and thank it for its body and work with tobacco and send our prayers. And then while Wolf was in the womb in 2020, she grew from that bison. So how do we establish a deep connection and honoring and reverence to the food that we eat? And then beyond that, can I participate in that myself on a smaller scale? And the answer was yes. So, after 2020, we realized too with Fit for Service, we had gone there in October of 2020. That was the first time people had hugged all fucking year long. 80% of them. First time they hugged another person all year long. First time Parangi played live music in front of anybody all year long. So the feeling was visceral in what we were creating together. Of course, no one got sick. And Arizona was a cool place, but they still said, the maximum occupancy we could have was 20 people with masks. And we got 150, 200 people at our events. We knew we couldn't have that. So Aubrey has 46 acres in the back of a house in Sedona. We retrofitted that with, big Burning Man tents, and we did this all outdoors together, and it was fantastic. So with the sale of On It, I really got an ob's ear, like, let's have a second place. Let's have some land in Texas that I can steward, where I can grow our own food, where we can have events, and we at least have two places where we can bring people in, because Fit for Service dies if we don't do face-to-face. You know how different it is between a call like this and between the warm embrace of two people, or between, going through the breath work together, right? You've got your brothers and sisters in arms where you're going to push each other, and the energy of that field is building and building and building. And when you walk through, the fire walk together, you come out on the other side of it better for having done so. Absolutely. Those have to be done face to face.
Yeah.
So thankfully, Ob listened, and we got 118 acres out in Lockhart that we've been stewarding for the last 2 years. Our home's almost finished being built on it. We've had events there. That's where we met at FTR. It's a fucking incredible space. And that represents this third phase. The third phase of my life has really been called out of my own inner, kingdom of, if I'm cool, you're cool. I won't fuck with you. Don't fuck with me. I'm going to have my family right. You can teach kids whatever the fuck, CRT, whatever the fuck you want to do. I'm going to homeschool my kids and do it that way. And 2020 was like, nope, we need to step out of the shadows now. No one is safe. Everyone is included in this in the entire world. There are things going on that are trying to change everything that we're trying to accomplish. And if you think that's happenstance, or who is the they, if you say they, Klaus Schwab wrote a book, COVID-19, The Great Reset. And he talks about the fourth industrial revolution and what the Great Reset is, and how COVID-19 is the catalyst for this new thinking. And it's not pretty. It's not good. Transhumanism is a part of this. And there's a lot of other nefarious things that go along with that. Now, you can rabbit hole that shit till your head explodes, or till you look at the darkness in the abyss and you realize that that doesn't end. I don't recommend that. And again, you have to balance these things. The warrior rebels against the things that it knows is wrong, but the ultimate warrior comes back to know, I will die for the things that I love.
Yeah. And
I think this is the calling to people out there who recognize the world will never be the same, and who recognize and want to know, how can I tend the garden? How can I have a relationship with nature? What does real health look like? Absolutely. And how do I build a community of like-minded individuals that are sovereign and know how to fucking take care of themselves? And so that's really what I'm into now, and really what I'll be teaching in this next course. That's physically fit, for lack of a better term. It's Fit for Service. Yeah. So I got physically fit, Godzi got mentally fit, Caitlin got emotionally fit, there's financially fit, there's relationship fit. I don't give a fuck how you lift weights or any of that. I could teach you things, but I really don't care, whether you're using a fucking kettlebell or a steel mace. Cool, man. Move your body. That's one of the 4 doctors for a reason. It is important. But I want to teach a lot more than that. And so my physical fitness class is going to be on, these 3 phases and how we really come to embody each of them, because each of them are important.
Yeah. And what are the 4 doctors again? Last 4 doctors
you'll ever need? Last 4 doctors you'd ever need. That's included in How to Eat, Move, Me Healthy. It's in the beginning of the book. He also has it on ebook, but that's Dr. Quiet. That's your sleep practice, your meditation practice, Tai Chi, anything energy building. Dr. Movement is yoga, yoga, running, weightlifting, anything movement-wise, hiking, gardening, anything movement-wise is in there. Dr. Diet, supplements, water, food, anything you put into your body. And then Dr. Happiness, what are the things that fill your cup each day? What is your vocation in life? What will put you here to do while you're here? And how do I scratch a little bit off that big goal each day? And what can I do to fill my cup each day that makes it worthwhile? So I'm not just working in the prostitute archetype for 20 years so that in 20 years I've saved up enough to do the thing I actually want. No, enjoy each day as you go and utilize that energy to give back. So as I fill my cup, it overflows into everything I touch.
Hell yeah. Yeah, I love it. And I love that you brought that up, right? And so for those that don't know, the prostitute archetype is essentially like selling yourself, selling your soul, your joy,
The shadow,
working
but there's a
and
bright
working
side,
for
right?
right? And working for a system that you think is going to bring you fulfillment later. So sacrificing yourself, selling yourself, doing something that you don't love, which actually is a energetic pull negatively on the planet and on yourself, because eventually when you're in that system long enough, you will start to break down. You will get mentally sick, physically sick, emotionally sick. Like your soul doesn't want you to be in that container that constricts you, right? We are meant to live in the highest alignment with what our heart desires, which is a very unique and personal journey that we all have the right to discover. Like it is our birthright to be healthy and to be in joy and to be in alignment. That is, as Kyle's talking about, gets taken away by these systems that have been put in place for lots of different reasons that we certainly can go down the rabbit hole with. But it's ultimately up to us to recognize that and to really do our inner work to come into alignment with what we want to create, how we want to feel, and letting go of those systems and programs that are pulling us out of like our freedom of choice, really.
Yeah, well, I will add one thing. The prostitute archetype, as you spoke about it, is the negative version of that. And that's where most people spend their time. The positive version of that is when you recognize I'm doing something I don't like. When I knew I was in a strip club, I met one person in there who moved from stripper to bartender, put herself through school and became an RN out of Berkeley. She utilized the prostitute archetype exactly correctly. Most people would say the money's good. I actually don't mind this. I like to party. And then I also know people who burnt, they fucking burnt the candle at both ends. They danced until they were no longer asked to dance, and they bartended until they were no longer asked to bartend, and they had nothing. They never met the guy of their dreams while they were doing that. They had no money to show for it at the end. That would be the wrong version of that. And as Caroline Mace points out, we have 4 innate archetypes that are in us: the child, which has a wide variety, archetype of the child, the saboteur, and the victim, and the prostitute. And we can, again, light side and shadow side to each of these. But when we recognize that for ourselves and we actually start contributing, there is a means to an end when we have the prostitute archetype in alignment. Then we can say, all right, cool, I've got this job for now. This is not where I end up. I know where I'm going. And I start putting energy and resources towards that. Then that can alleviate some of the pain of actually doing the thing you don't want to do right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what Kyle just described is really, it's what Caroline Myss calls the survivor archetypes, right? It's like, those are the ways that we survive the adverse experiences that we go through in order to be able to grow up and to live in the world. But what eventually happens is that becomes no longer fulfilling, right? We go down this rabbit hole until we actually want to channel and do that deeper work to say, like, I don't want to be like this anymore. I don't want to feel like this anymore. Like something's got to give, and that's when we get into, if we choose not to listen, we'll go through like most likely a dark night of the soul, which I've been through many because I'm pretty stubborn. But it's always, on a path. And I love that I don't want to say out of alignment, but the way that you were living when you had, I would say, like your first dark night of the soul, when you were naked, literally, and about to end your own life, that to me feels like a very incredibly like pivotal moment for you. We're like, yeah, no, things have to change. And maybe I am here for a reason. Maybe there's something else outside of me that is speaking to me that I can tune into to help me live my life in a different way. So how did you start to develop that relationship with that voice that spoke to you?
That's a great question. It was so visceral. I understood it, and I understood it, as the peace that I'm seeking, I will have. Like there was like a guarantee given to me, like, cool, don't worry, I don't need to worry about that. It's going to happen. Can I endure some more? Sure. And maybe life can be better if I actually start to fix shit and think about things in different ways and actually plan for this stuff rather than just being along for the ride. Like I said, it took years before plant medicines came into the picture, and I had, because I had the training with Maestro Witsi, my boxing coach, we were taught respect and reverence from the long beforehand, just for the sweat, the respect and reverence of that ceremony. We were taught about intention just in the sweat through prayer. And there was one other pivotal moment before I really started working with Wheatsy. I had a girlfriend, a college sweetheart for 6.5 years. And I was buying a wedding ring and I had the down payment down and which is $5,000 for the down payment. And it was going to be 15 grand total. And I started in that moment, I was like, well, I just won fight of the night for 60 grand. If I don't buy a ring now, I don't make enough money to do that. So I should do that now. The next thing is we get married. This is a natural progression. And I didn't really know how to use plant medicines well at that point. So we took some mushrooms, me and a buddy of mine, and we went and saw The Green Lantern with Ryan Reynolds. And that's a fucking horrible movie to watch. Plain and simple.
Oh, hell no.
It's the worst movie to watch on mushrooms. I was like, oh fuck, I was turning away from it. The villain who looks so gross, like this
In a
movie,
theater?
it sucks. And it's on a giant screen and it's creepy as all hell. And I was like, oh man, I just didn't feel good. So I was like, you know what, let's go for a walk. So I went for a walk with my buddy and this big mastiff I had in college named Lola. She's 175 pounds. She's my big girl. And so I'm walking her and it's a full moon. And I realized, I'm like, man, the house is always messy. I don't feel, fully seen. There's a lot of things that I was feeling as we got out of that movie and started walking. And I'm just pretty much complaining to my buddy about the situation I'm in, knowing this relationship might not work. And here I am buying a wedding ring. And so, he of course played oh, I'm sure it'll all be fine. You guys are meant to be together, blah, blah, blah. Because everyone was friends with her too. At that point we had been together for so long. She's a great person. And I got home and that night I made a prayer. And the prayer was, God, if you're there, if you exist, let me know if this is going to work or not. But make it visceral. Make it so blunt that I can't turn away from it, because I might say if it's kind of there, kind of not there, I might lie to myself and say, no, that's not what it was. Because I didn't want to be 5 years into the relationship and have it not work. And now we've got kids.
Yeah.
And that happened with my parents. That happens with so many of us. And I didn't want to do it that way. And so I made that prayer pretty much not knowing if it was worth anything at all. I went to bed. The next morning she broke up with me. And I was like, mouth wide open, like, what the fuck? And we weren't even in a fight or anything. Like, there was just no reason for it. And she's crying. And we were all but married. We had lived together for a year. We had a fucking joint bank account, like you name it. Everything else was there. Everything else was married but the marriage.
Oh.
And she's like, aren't you sad? And I was like, yeah, but I made this prayer last night to God and I asked this thing and like, here you are breaking up. And I'm like, God is fucking real. What the fuck is happening right now? Like, I was overjoyed and sad at the same time.
Yeah.
Wow, and
what a story.
And from that point on, I knew I could pray. And from that point on, I knew I could pray. I knew I could tap in. So fast forward to working with Wheatsy and the plant medicines, that relationship deepened. And then of course, as you go through that, the hopeful progression for all of us is that we realize that medicine's always inside us, that we always have a direct connection to source, and that you don't need the medicine to communicate.
Yeah.
I can communicate with plants. Dr. Will Tagle was one of my favorite mentors before he passed away, because he taught me you could communicate with an eco field. You can communicate with the forest. You can communicate with the wind. You can communicate with the mountain. You can communicate with the fucking ocean. All of that knowledge and wisdom is accessible to us because all is of or nothing is. Just as Paul Selig states, all is of consciousness, all is of source or nothing is, and all is intelligent, all is conscious. Somebody like, well, what about a desk? Or what about it? Like, all right, leave it up to you. Figure this out for yourself. Don't take my word for any of it. But my relationship changed drastically with ayahuasca and nature. And because I had that ability to pray and ask for things, and I've communicated with trees. I've done a lot of weird shit. And I've gotten really deep prophetic answers from different beings that don't make sense to most people with a scientific materialistic mind. So I don't expect them to take that at face value, but my experience has been that way. And I found my second dark night of the soul was with plant medicine, and it blew my fucking mind, literally destroyed my mind for a long time. It took me a long time to piece myself back together. Thankfully, I had the guidance of Paul Chek and many others to help me. So there's a big caution there, with going too deep down the rabbit hole. But that said, my internal dialogue with source has never been greater. And I still participate with ceremony, but it's far less. I've done ayahuasca once in the last 2 years. We went down to Soltara last year, and it might be a couple years before I go back. I found a lot of value in that. But because I had this open dialogue, it's not necessarily something where, before when I first started down that path, it was, all right, I'm writing a list of shit that I'm going to talk to source about in the next ceremony. And now, if I write something down, it'll come up for me in meditation. It'll come up for me in a walk in nature. It'll come up for me sitting by a tree, and I'll know viscerally what the answer is. So that internal compass is so dialed at this point that it's just not necessary for me to do that anymore.
Absolutely. And I love that. I love that path. And the fact that you're able to, you call it like you're tuning for when you're tuned in to that energy inside of you that we all have that gets blocked through our unresolved, undigested emotion, through traumas, through the crap we put in our body, through lack of sleep, through burnout. Like we don't have a clear open channel. And so you really have done so much work on yourself to be able to be that tuning fork, to listen to when nature's speaking to you and to ask the right questions. So what would you say to someone who is kind of in that zone or in that matrix, right? I work with a lot of men who are like, some of I call it maybe not ready or denial of like, what do you mean? I don't have to look at my past. I don't have to look at my childhood, right? Like my marriage is fine. It's okay that she doesn't value me and that I don't feel like the man in my home. Like, how do you what's your advice to men that are still living in that really wounded state or like unawakened state to help get them to open up to the possibility that maybe it's not an accident that they're here and that they do have other things to birth into the world that they're not ready to face?
Yeah, I think that's a beautiful question. I know there's a lot of folks that are in that position. I'm really thinking about two things. One, first and foremost, the four doctors, and we can go back over that for a second. And secondly, the pain teacher. So don't let me forget about the pain teacher.
Okay.
The reason the four doctors comes up for me is because if you find something that makes you happy every day and a big picture of what are my goals, and that can change over time. It doesn't have to be the same thing over time. I always laugh when people like do a 5-year time capsule. It's like 5 years ago, I don't know what the fuck I'd be doing right now. 5 years before that, I had no fucking idea I'd be a dad.
Yeah.
5 years before that, I think I'd be pictured in the UFC 10 years from now. I didn't know I was going to retire at 32. Like I had no idea that any of these things were going to happen when they did. So that's always comical, but still you can have a dream, what that dream looks like to you. What does your dream life actually look like? How does that serve the world? Not just serve yourself, but how does that make everything better around you? And when you start thinking in those terms, source starts to help you, right? This thing starts to get to draw to you. Synchronicity starts to happen. And it's an important thing to have because people get so caught in what they're doing, they forget to look up. They forget to look out and say, oh, I actually have some dominion here. I have some choice over how my life is turning out. If I step out of the victim archetype and say, I take responsibility for my health, I take responsibility for my life, I take responsibility for my situation, that's the only way you get the steering wheel back in your hands.
That's right.
And it takes movement. It takes putting the right foods and water in your body, and it takes having a good sleep and a good restoration process to accomplish anything. So movement, diet, and quiet are your foundational building blocks to achieve happiness at the top of that pyramid.
I love that. And I think the resistance that I find is the quiet, right? Like there's like put pen to paper, reflect, get to know yourself. There's like some barrier between that I notice definitely in the masculine around even any emotion that wants to bubble up, right? They have that protector part of you're not supposed to cry. You're not supposed to feel anger. You're not supposed to feel emotion. Like you have to always keep it together. So how do you, and we'll get to the pain teacher in a minute, but what's the words of encouragement for someone who has that resistance to really sit in quiet with themselves and figure themselves out and to feel what they need to feel?
Yeah, that's for me personally, the blessing of plant medicine was it opened that door for me. I could not sit in silence to save my fucking life. I tried binaural beats, meditation apps, you name it. Nothing worked for meditation. And I actually had a few journeys in a row with ayahuasca where I was being told meditate and do yoga. And second one, it was once a month, right? So come back month 2, do meditation and yoga. And I'm like, cool, you told me that last month. And I'm just sitting there waiting and I'm like, oh, I didn't do it yet. Okay, heard. And I leave. I come back a month later, meditation and yoga. And I was like, you keep fucking telling me that. And I was like, oh, I really haven't implemented that at all. I haven't even tried it. And so I took a year and a half off of IA. I started working with yoga and meditation. And at that point, still hadn't really clicked for me, but I was able to touch moments of stillness that really taught me what was the point in my meditation, right? I could feel a certain way, a certain drop of peace would enter me. And I said, maybe that's what meditation's about. And finally, I got hooked up with a lady named Emily Fletcher, who has a program called Ziva Meditation, ZIVA, and she changed my fucking life. It's a mantra-based meditation. It's 6,000 years old. It's based in the Vedic traditions. What came of transcendental meditation went down one way, they went down the other way, but it has the same origins. And haven't tried TM. I hear it's a little bit more rigid and a little bit more financial and things like that. She runs an online course that has, I think, about 25 videos that tell you what meditation isn't. And those alone will change your life. I did a fantastic podcast with her. She's been on twice, but the first podcast we did together, I tried to draw 80% of that program out into her words so she could teach people that. Because without that, I think we're aiming, meditation is such a loose word. It's like God. Like, what are we actually talking about here, right? Can I meditate with headphones on? There's many forms of it that all get lumped in the same category. But with the mantra, I don't want to dive too deep into this, but I would say check out zivameditation.com because that is such a fantastic starting place for people to actually do things correctly, if there is a correct way to do it. And she'll tell you, you could meditate for 20 minutes. And if you're thinking for 19 minutes and rabbit holing ideas and having a full-on conversation with yourself, in the last minute, you hit your mantra and meditate for 60 seconds, that's a fucking win because you meditated, right? You use the mantra, use the vehicle to drop below the mind. It's not the 19 minutes that you weren't, right? If you fail is where you sit down and meditate and you actually, oh, this is too important. I'm gonna forget it. I'm gonna get on my phone. I'm gonna write some shit down. I'm gonna get on this call. It's more important than the meditation. That's the only way you fail.
Yeah.
The mind can go back. The mind will always mind, something she says, to try to say that you're going to stop the mind is like saying, I'm going to give myself a resting heartbeat of 0. You have a resting heartbeat of 0 when you're dead. The mind's job is to think, and you don't become mindless until you're dead, right? And even then, the mind continues in many different ways that we all get to learn about when we die. But
yeah, I love that.
I think those are great starting places. Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say, one of the things that changed my relationship to meditation was to meditate just means to become familiar with, right? Let me just become familiar with what my mind is doing, what my body's doing, the urge that I have to get up and move. And if you guys ever choose to do full temple reset, I don't know, are you still including the Ziva meditation as part of that program?
Yeah, we still do it. I still encourage people to run that. It's not included in it, but we meditate every day together and I give these pointers out.
Yeah, it's amazing. It really I still use my mantra and I use it very often. Mine means surrender, which is definitely something that I am moving more into this year, right? Surrender and trust. And it's Sanskrit. So the body automatically knows what it means. And you don't have to explain it with the mind. It's ancient and familiar. It's definitely check it out and we'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, let's talk about the pain body.
The pain teacher. The pain body is Eckhart Tolle's work. Pain body is Eckhart Tolle's work, and there's brilliance in Eckhart Tolle's work. I've read A New Earth probably a dozen times, maybe more. I've even listened to him. A lot of people can't stand listening to him, but the content of that book has actually changed my life so much that I can listen to him and his slow cadence, and it's just the most soothing fucking thing. But I've really grabbed onto that. There's so much wisdom in his book there. The pain teacher is different. The pain teacher is, what Paul Chek talks about as a teacher that comes that starts with a whisper. It might be a pain in your throat, it might be a pain in your knee. And if you don't acknowledge it or pay attention to it, then the pain teacher knocks at your front door. And if you don't acknowledge it or pay attention to it, the pain teacher will kick your fucking door down. And there is a ramping up effect, right? Like it takes 10 years to build stage 4 cancer. Like you work towards that thing. You work yourself towards obesity. It doesn't happen overnight for most people. And that said, you get to start to understand how the pain teacher operates. And with the respect and reverence of the pain teacher, you can start to get these calls and these signs early. For people who are stubborn, for people who don't think that any of this stuff is valuable, or they don't want to listen to you on why they should journal or why they should meditate or why they should do any of this shit, pain teacher is a valuable teacher, because the pain teacher, that again, if you look at like the precipice of where that goes with the dark night of the soul, it will always fucking win. It's going to get your attention one way or another. And With that, a humbling experience can allow us to break down enough to where we have to build ourselves back up. And with that experience, we can be inclusive of that. We can have the humility to surrender as necessary. We can have the humility to say, I don't know all of this. Please help. And we
Yeah.
look to people and mentors. We look to books. We look to something, a greater thing, something that's greater than us. Could be the ocean, could be God, could be whatever the fuck you want to call that. But we look to these things for the wisdom necessary to help us. And I feel like when we turn ourselves over in that way, we're granted a greater degree of awareness. And so that pain actually is a part of the process of our unfolding and a necessary part of the process, especially the more stubborn we are.
That's so good. And I've at least gotten to the point where I know when something is coming up in me that I'm so curious at that, like, why, what's coming up, what is my body trying to tell me, why am I having this thought, where is that coming from? Like, you really just open up to the idea that your body is always sending you messages to the mind, right? And when we get very clear and we look at that pain as our teacher versus something like the stories that our wounded self holds on to, like something's wrong with us, something I'm not enough, all the stories that the mind creates about what's going on with the body, we can get to that place of clarity internally, to be curious, to explore it, to want to move through it, and know that these emotions, to go back at our question earlier, is like, they're not permanent. They're meant to rise up, they're meant to move and to come out of us. But we've been so conditioned to keep it together and pretend that we're okay or we're fine or that we're strong for the masculine, right? Any masculine that's emotional is weak, by society standards. But the most healthy, well-rounded men I know are incredibly are full of emotion and in their heart center, right? Like, a lot of the men in Fit for Service are this way. Like, they lead from the heart, right? They don't lead but from something that they have to prove and something that they have to become. It's, I embody who I am just by my presence and knowing that that is enough, and how I communicate and how I feel, to others. And it brings me actually to the podcast that I dove into with you with Peter Crone. And for those of you who don't know who that is, Peter Crone is the mind architect, and he really helps just dive right into the root cause of all of your beliefs and why they're there, and kind of like breaks you open. And he definitely did that to me with one of my experiences after I got a minute to talk to him. And I was like, wow, he is so good with what he can pick up on in 0.2 seconds that it really wrenches you. So I encourage you guys to go watch episode number 293 on the Kyle Kingsbury podcast with him and Peter Crone to know exactly what we're talking about. But the foundation of what I want to dive into with you, Kyle, is he really helped you understand about how your belief system that you were carrying, I think before you talked to him on an unconscious level, was that the world is dangerous, and how you were kind of like setting up your life to combat that in a way. And I'm curious to know how that has shifted since that conversation, and what he really helped you discover that wasn't there until you got him on your podcast.
Yeah, that's a great question. As he says in the podcast, we think words are descriptive, but they're really creative. And to the scientific materialist, they would say that's nonsense, right? But to those who know, who have experienced that, and even the power of your word in manifesting, you go through Joe Dispenza's work, or you go into plant medicines and you see the power of your word and your thoughts literally create your experience on the medicine. That's a pretty eye-opening thing to be a part of. And he was dead on. The world was dangerous to me from a young age, and I had every reason to believe so. And it was dangerous to me through not just my parents. It was dangerous to me walking home from school and having to fucking run my ass off or turn around and fight. It was dangerous on the football field. I selected a dangerous sport in fighting. I constantly looked for ways to prove that the world was dangerous. And, even now, one of the things that I love about Peter Crone is he doesn't shy away from the dark shit. He knows what's happening to kids all over the world with sex trafficking. He's not a head in the sand kind of guy at all. With that, though, the world is a beautiful place. The world is still all possibility, infinite probability. And so how I use language becomes very important for me when I describe what this place actually is, because it's going to mirror that back to me. Robert Anton Wilson is a phenomenal author. He wrote Prometheus Rising, Eric Godsey's favorite book. He also wrote, God, what is it? I got to find it. Something about the cosmic. I'm gonna fuck it up. Anyways, Robert Anton Wilson. Let me just get to this before I forget his damn book. That's not important. One of the things he
You
says in
rarely
this other
forget a
book.
book name, so I'm
I
surprised.
know. I've been chewing on so much lately. One of the things Robert Anton Wilson says is he goes, I don't believe in reality. There is no single reality. I believe in realities. And what that means is based on your word and your thinking, you will create your own reality tunnel, which is going to mirror back to you your experience of what you believe and what you say. And I had read that book at the exact same time, The Cosmic Trigger. I had read that book at the exact same fucking time. I finished it 2 days before meeting Peter Crone, my second time, which was at our event, Fit for Service. The synchronicities and things like that, it still blows me the fuck away how on it is, where it's just like, all right, I hear you loud and clear. I hear you loud and clear. But that one hit home, like a dagger through the heart. And one of the things that I've done since then, right? And Peter told me this, he goes, go for a walk on your land and voice the possibility that all of this is love. Voice the possibility that you live in unconditional love. Voice the possibility that everything you're experiencing is positive in a certain way. And, as I really started to chew on that, I had a bunch of signs. I had a red-tailed hawk circling overhead, calling out to me. I had a number of other things on that walk. I bumped into a red stag deer who didn't run from me. They stood at 20 yards and stared me down. And that's a palpable feeling when you come across an animal like that. They're almost as big as a fucking elk. And I'm just locked into the presence of this majestic, beautiful animal.
Wow.
And those are affirming to me. They're confirming. And you could say that's coincidence. I don't believe in coincidence. Robert Anton Wilson doesn't believe in coincidence. Peter Crone doesn't believe in coincidence. But that started to fundamentally allow me to change my view of the reality that I live in. And with that, not shy away from the potentials of what could be.
Sure.
As I mentioned with the warrior figures out what's worth dying for. That's an important piece that society's forgotten. We put everything into somebody else's hand. We've given away the responsibility of our own health. The doctor keeps me healthy. That's not true.
No.
We give our power away. The police protect me. The fire department protects me. The military protects me. That's not true. They do a fucking great job, but in 8 minutes that it takes them to get to your house, I can promise you the worst thing in your life can happen inside of 8 minutes, and that person can be long gone before the cops get there.
Oh, yeah.
You protect yourself or you don't. No one else is in charge of that. And so really understanding that in addition to the deeper picture of what the world looks like, that's a big part of my calling in waking people up, for lack of a better term, and just bringing us into, waking up gets used so fucking often. That's probably not the term that I want to use, but making people sovereign requires them to step into their own power. What does sovereignty mean? What does freedom actually mean? Chewing on these terms and saying, if I truly want to be free, that actually requires interconnectivity in a positive way. You're never going to be on a fucking island. We live in a sea of consciousness where everything is alive, everything is awake, everything is aware. And so with that, how do I come into harmony with my environment? Aho Mitakuyasin. A lot of people hear that saying from the Lakota. It means all my relations, loosely. But what are you related to? You're related to fucking everything. So when you make a prayer and you say all my relations, you're calling that out into everything that exists, as above, so below, as within, so without. And as I really understand that prayer a little deeper, I understand that, the what Don Howard was big into was para el bien de todos, for the good of all, right? Can I be in harmony with the all? And can I use that as the compass of where I'm going? And what needs to happen to create the more beautiful world that we know is possible, our hearts know is possible. Fuck yeah, we can do that. We can always do that. And when you think of the powers that be versus, the powerless, people are never fucking powerless. We outnumber people in charge, 100,000 to 1. So if we're able to understand what creates community, what creates strength, what creates sovereignty, what allows us to work together so that little pockets of people, this is the same conversation going around wealth. What does a centralized system look like versus a decentralized system? What does centralized food look like? Tyson, Cargill, six meat companies run 90% of the meat in the world. That's not healthy meat. That's sad cow, sad chicken under the shittiest circumstances. I don't want to eat that. So I don't vote for that with my dollar. I vote for health with my dollar. I vote for regenerative agriculture. It doesn't mean you have to become a farmer, but you should know where your food comes from. You should
Yeah.
visit that farm once in your life and say, cool, this is where I get my milk from. I go 90 minutes southwest of here to Strick Farm in Schulenburg, Texas. They have the massive acreage with rolling green hills and the best Jersey cows you've ever seen. So it's raw A2 dairy cows, the best milk I've ever had. And I take my son out there and we touch those cows and they come up and snuggle. They're the fucking happiest cows I've ever been around.
Love
Right.
it.
I don't go there all the time, but I want to visit that place. I want to know, are these guys about it? Are they walking the walk and the talk that they present to us? Fuck yeah, they do. All right, we're in. And then I can have it delivered and I can do it through other things where I'm still able to access that without taking a 90-minute drive each direction. But the point is, build a relationship and a connection to everything that you participate in. One of my favorite guys, Ice Age Farmer, ended up getting pulled off YouTube because of the stuff that he was saying. One of the most famous things that I ever loved him for was saying, we must produce more than we consume. Now, again, you can think of that from a food standpoint. We've done that on 118 acres. We've got 70 sheep. We've got 400 fruit and nut trees in our food forest that'll really kick off 7 or 8 years from now. But we're producing more than we consume already. We're sitting on 2,000 regenerative eggs that have the deepest orange yolk I've ever seen. It's the tastiest eggs you've ever had. We're actually putting those in our shakes now, raw for full temple reset.
Nice.
And so, unless you're vegan, we can exclude that. But I'm telling you, the fucking egg is the real deal. And that's not everyone's path. When we look at broken systems, we're not here to patch any broken systems. We're here to change the systems entirely. And what that takes is a burning desire from within. One of my favorite books is A Return to Eros from Mark Gaffney and his partner, Christina Kincaid. We're actually doing 12 episodes on this throughout the year, 14 episodes. So we have the 12 Faces of Eros, and we have a couple intro podcasts that are out right now that are going to build up to what we're actually speaking of. And he likens Eros to the fundamentals of consciousness. And he talks about how these first principles apply to everything we do. So in short, on Eros, it's our desire, it's our allurement, right? I don't need to clean the plastic in the ocean because that's not the thing that I'm drawn towards. Somebody else is going to be drawn to that and they're going to fucking figure that out. I'm confident of that. Bobby Kennedy's been working on waterways and systems for 20 years and he's done a shit ton of good work. There's people like Bobby Kennedy that are handling that. I want to be able to know that I can provide clean, the very best food for my kids and my family and my friends. So we're doing that. There's a way to participate in this that you're actually drawn to. That's the thing. When you say, what should I do? What book should I read? What should I do next to help others? Do the thing that calls you. Do the thing that you're actually drawn to from the inside out, where there's a genuine draw. There's a magnetism pulling you in that direction. That's what you're meant to do.
I love that. And it's so true, right? Desire is divine. Like that is only you. That is source speaking through you. No one else has that but you. And it is. So I was actually going to ask you, what would you say your definition of Eros is?
Ooh, it's kind of hard to say because there are many different things that go in it. You could say when you're there, it's kind of like flow state. One of the faces of Eros is being on the inside. And as Mark says, sex models the erotic. It doesn't exhaust the erotics. And what he talks about is how sex is a model for living. When we have great sex, we are literally on the inside, both of us. It doesn't matter male or female. You're on the inside of an experience. If you're sexing wrong, you're thinking about, how do I look? Am I doing it right? Does she like this? Does he like that? Am I big enough? All those things are in the freshman mindset in sex. But when you're fully in there, you're fully on the inside. Both men and women have taken into a layer of depth they don't experience in everyday ordinary states of consciousness. Absolutely. That is modeling the erotic. It's a modeling a way to be in the world itself. So for me to be on the inside of a conversation, I'm 100% here with you right now. There's no goddamn thing I'm thinking about except for answering your question right now. And I'm super pumped to do it because I had to cancel on you once before and I fucking love you and I want to have a great conversation with you and I miss you, right?
Hell yeah.
I love your energy. I love your field. And I was excited that you asked me to come on. We're on the inside of this thing right now. We're there. Pseudo Eros he'll talk about is, where you recognize some inherent part of you recognize you're not on the inside. So you point to what isn't on the inside. So you might say your friend who always talks shit about their employer and has the bad relationship, and you point out that they're not on the inside. That's pseudo Eros, right? You can see when someone else isn't there, but it doesn't necessarily pull you on the inside. So there's a difference between eros and pseudo eros. And these 12 faces really illuminate these different states of how we access this point of eros. And I think, having had that, another great one that he did, because he didn't do this on Audible, but he did a lecture called The Erotic and the Holy. That's on Audible, and it's really the breakdown. It was what this book became. And so he lectures on this. Mark's fucking hilarious. He's one of my favorite people, Kabbalistic Jew who's a mystic, but also fundamentally understands Christianity better than most Christians, understands Buddhism better than most Buddhists, and has really been all over the world. He's worked with the Dalai Lama. He's worked with several other people in his think tank. He's got Daniel Schmachtenberger. He's got Ken Wilber. He has people on, like the bucket list of people that are understanding consciousness and why we're here. And I think that, to me, he is the real deal when you get in his presence. And he has given me, much like I talked about King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, when we have an archetypical or mythological picture of how these different things express within us, we can frame that then with the rational mind, and then we intuit how we feel in those positions with the non-rational mind, right? This is how we utilize both sides. It is worthwhile to have both sides. It's not in saying, all this mentalist shit, throw it out the window and go to all feeling. No, we want both turned on at the same time. That way we know we're in the right place. And Mark's lexicon and what he's drawn off of really is beautiful. The way he translates the Torah and the Book of Solomon. Like, we taught for a whole year on the fourfold song of the self from the Book of Solomon, the song of the self. We start there. The song of the tribe, the song of humanity, and the song of the cosmos. And we spent a whole year on that because this is a natural progression. And we see this natural progression through life. When you're a kid, it's all about you, right? We've seen some adults who still act like it's all about them. And we're like, that's a little kid who got traumatized at 8, 9, 10 years old. And they're still stuck in its me world, right?
Absolutely.
But we move beyond that. Paul Chek talks about the I, we, all. The we is when we find relationship and we say, oh, if I'm going to do this right, it's not all about me. It's going to take compromise. It's going to take nonviolent communication. It's going to take a lot of giving and nurturing. And it's going to take a lot of understanding. It's going to take a lot of me leaving my ego at the door so that it doesn't get hurt sometimes. And I got to open myself up, even if I've been crushed and ripped apart before. I'm going to have to reopen myself up.
Yeah. When
we move from the we move to the all. That's the as above, so below. That's everything. I feel the all mostly in nature. If I had to think about something, it's kind of hard to picture the cosmos, beyond the sun and the moon. Unless you have like a draw to Venus or you have a fucking telescope. I don't really think about Andromeda or anything like that. I don't think about the microscopic. I mean, I do think about the microscopic a little bit more because we're into soil health and things of that nature. But really, it is nature where I connect to that deepest layer. And we have to have a relationship there as well. These pieces have to go and that progression must be there. So I think Mark is one of the most brilliant people on the planet. And again, the way he describes this stuff, it gives the thinking brain a tool set of how to picture these things and then how to operate. All right, am I in that? Can I feel like I'm in that? Let me feel. I know what it feels like when I'm there. The sex models that. And he's a brilliant, brilliant guy. We want that. We want to be, when you think of best sex, can I apply that to playing with friends? Without sex, can I apply that same level of intensity and joy and passion when I'm playing volleyball with Aubrey and the crew in Sedona? Fuck yeah. There's not a damn thing I'm thinking about but that. And that's why flow loosely correlates with that. But this is beyond flow. It's a deeper layer than flow. So I think for people looking, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, fantastic book for men. And A Return to Eros, fantastic book. Both of these books are fantastic for all people, honestly.
Absolutely. Hell yeah. You're such a wealth of knowledge. I just love it. All the books, all the things.
All the books.
And yeah, like the pseudo eros. And one of the things I love are the quotes that you taught that it's always playing in the back of my mind, right? So until you embody within you the thing that you're searching for, you'll never find it in another, right? So that goes along with that feeling of eros, right? So can you just talk a little bit about what that means as far as like, until you embody it, you'll never find it outside of you.
Right. And so this was taught to me through Joe Dispenza's work. And part of what he teaches is that, you can't just think something into existence. Thinking is electric. The magnetism comes from the feeling. So we have to match a feeling. When we're calling something in, we're manifesting something. We have to see it, think it, feel it, all the things. What does it bring us to have the car we want? What does it bring us to have the relationship we want? and imagine every aspect of that while leaving enough of it open so that source can provide the right person, the right job, the right whatever the fuck you're manifesting. One of the critical pieces and components of that is whatever I'm asking for and the thing I'm calling in, I must embody it already. Meaning, if I'm asking for a partner who's open, who's willing to read the things that I'm reading, who's willing to change their ideas about the nature of reality, who's maybe interested in doing something scary, like participating in an altered state of consciousness. That could be plant medicines, could be a darkness retreat. Darkness scares the shit out of me. I've done 30 grams of mushrooms in one whack. Like there are things that are frightening to us. And if I want somebody that embodies that, I can call them in all fucking day long. But if I don't embody that in myself, I will never see it. And we have these little tests to see if you're there yet. When I first started dating my wife, I had called in all these things. I had participated in Dispenza's work to call it in. And she asked me to read the 5 love languages. And I didn't want to fucking read it. But I knew I had books I wanted her to read. So I read that in 2 days. And I talked to her. I was like, well, I'm actually, touch is my leading love language. And, acts of service is one. And, gifts probably pretty low, but I like all those. There's some amalgamation of all 5, but touch is really my love language. And that was hers too. So it made things a little easier. But what that did is it opened the door for her to say yes. She grew up super Christian. And I was like, check out A New Earth. And she's like, and then with some plant medicine journey, she's like, oh, I get what he's talking about now as I revisit this, same with diet. So many couples have a hard time. You start dating somebody and you actually know a little bit and you're taking care of yourself and your partner doesn't, and your partner probably gives you shit for it. And so maybe you let your diet slip because you still want this person to love you and you want them to care about you. And you can say, yeah, I don't have to be rigid. I could eat this cheesecake or I could do this. That happens a ton, all the time.
Absolutely.
And then, will you go through how do you move be healthy together? Will you figure out what diet is right for you both? And that doesn't mean you eat perfect all the time. I had fucking pizza 2 weeks ago. Shitty glutinous store-bought pizza, like at a pizzeria, right? It wasn't great. But that gives you the 80%. It gives you I know where I need to put the right foods in my body. It gives you what does right doctor diet for me look like. And it's a starting place. It's a starting place where if you're willing to go through it together, you can accomplish a lot together. We see this too at Fit for Service in different places. Czech sees it all the time coming through his academy. Someone's doing the work and their other partner is not. That will lead to a divide naturally. It did with my college sweetheart. I was flying home to do plant medicines and fight and be a good boy. I'd come home to Scottsdale and be party time. And at a certain point in time, I didn't want to go out in Scottsdale. I didn't think poorly of it. I felt full. I didn't feel like I needed it. And I'd rather eat some mushrooms and go see the Green Lantern and walk my 175-pound dog. So you could see where this divide met just by one person taking a slight turn. Use in boating, you turn the dial just at 1 degree off. When you go far enough, you're on a completely different continent. And I think it's really important for people who are in relationship to really, to walk the walk, embody the thing you're asking your partner to do first is the first step. And you're not always going to be met there, but at least you've done your part. And I think for anything we're trying to manifest or create, we have to be the living example of that thing. And then you could say, does that make me worthy of it or whatever, however you want to language that into your understanding of it. But the truth is you have to have that. And I think if you do, that makes it easier. And one of the things Paul says is, when you're manifesting money or an increase in income, you have to have made at least 50% of whatever it is you're calling in. If you make 30,000 a year and you're like, next year I'm going to make $1 million. There's a part of you that knows you can't make $1 million next year and won't even allow that to be manifest.
Yep.
But if you're at 30, you can say, I'm going to do 60 next year, and you do 60 and you work your way up till you're at 500. And you're like, next year I am going to make a fucking $1 million, and you do. Right. So same thing, if you've been dating people that aren't the very best, you might have a couple more people to date before you meet your dream person, but that is there. And everyone you're with is an opportunity to learn and an opportunity to grow and an opportunity to find what is it that I'm looking for? Who is my right person? And who do I need to be to bring that person into my existence?
Absolutely. Well said. It's that seeking, searching, right? Like that someone's going to fix me or that has to be my other half to compliment me. It's like, no. I don't want a half mate. Like I want a whole mate, like someone that's going to, do the work and do the thing and like bring out the best in each other. If not just continue to like activate wounds because I'm looking at you as my savior or my source of love. And then that just completely goes to shit in so many ways. And you found that. And I think that you and what I love about the Fit for Service container and all of my teachers is that they do the work, right? They talk about their struggles as a couple. Nothing is perfect, right? They talk about their flaws. They talk about the things that they could have did better, or what they're asking, and how to communicate in a healthy way, and how to show mutual respect for someone, even if it is a different point of view or they don't necessarily agree with that. And that is the foundation of creating the world that we want to live in, right? Is how do I see myself in you? Even if you come from a different background, that person is still sovereign. They're still divine. They're not lower than or less than you. They are they're equal, right? No one is above, no one is below. We are all here to learn from each other, to model like what we want to call in and what we want to eliminate and what we don't necessarily want. But we get to be that creator, as we talked about earlier, right? Like I get to create the more beautiful world by knowing exactly what my heart desires, not what society expects of us, right? Not the way that we want to look at, the white picket fence and like the dream life, the American dream that we've all felt trapped to, that we clearly know is not working anymore, right? It's like, it's within us. And so I love all the things that you teach. I love everything that you've taught me. I love the Fit for Service community. Kyle, what's coming up for you this year? We talked about your Physically Fit program. I absolutely encourage you to follow him on the Kyle Kingsbury podcast if you want to dive deeper into optimizing your health, knowing exactly what's going on in the world. He has amazing teachers on there that are helping him grow, that are teaching us this new wave of consciousness and this new wave of earth that's coming. What else is on your plate for this upcoming year?
Yeah, Fit for Service, definitely check it out. I'm teaching the physical, which, as I mentioned, is a lot different than just physically fit. It's pretty much the gamut of everything that I've learned through these 3 stages. So I'm very excited to be doing that. We'll be meeting in Montana. So again, that starts March 12th. Get up there, sign up. We want you now. And secondary to that, if you want to be hands-on in regenerative agriculture, permaculture, any of these things, how do I grow my own food? It started in my mom's garage on a 1/4 acre. We started with a raised bed and planting 6 fruit trees that all did really well. They produce a ton of fruit. And that was my first little intro into gardening and having a relationship with nature. And I loved that. It worked very well. We have a 1/10 of an acre right now in our house in Austin. And we've optimized the shit out of that. We have a giant plum tree. We've got bamboo that gives us privacy. And there's a million ways you can make that cool. We have flowers in the front garden that grow 8 feet tall. And it brings in the hummingbirds, the bees, and the butterflies. And that strengthens the relationship with the pollinators and what Paul calls the sex organs of the earth. So if you're into those things, go to gardenersofeden.earth. That's our farm website. And we'll be doing a weekend in the life of, where people will get to come out. We'll sauna, we'll ice bath, we'll hit a little team workout outside, we'll shovel shit, we'll move the cheap, we'll do all the things that we do on the land, and we'll have a deep dive discussion of what it means to be sovereign and what it means to grow our own food and how accessible that is. And we've got 118 acres, but our food forest is on 3 acres. We wanted to build it small enough so that people could picture themselves doing that with very little land. You could do it on 1 acre. We've got 120 chickens, 16 ducks, 3 geese. They're all in that food forest on the 3.5 acres, making our trees come to life. And so much of this is a lot more accessible to people than they think it is. So if you're interested in that, just sign up for the newsletter. We will not bombard you with stupid shit. You probably get one newsletter a month at maximum, but you'll be the first to know when we offer these dates for people to come out to the farm and experience what it is that we're doing there at Gardeners of Eden.
Oh, that's incredible. Thank you so much. Top 3 places, if you're not growing your own food, where would you get the best meat, the best supplements for your body, the best dairy, produce? What's your go-to for people?
Well, not everyone's going to do great with dairy. It depends. So I'd start with how do you move and be healthy and feel, through an elimination diet. It is good, clean dairy have a place for me. There's a site called getrealmilk.com. And you punch in your address and it'll show you who's next to you, what kind of cows they have. Do they have A2 casein? Because most people have a problem with Holstein cows, the black and white dairy cows. They have a casein that's not found in mother's milk. It's not found in goat milk or sheep milk, and it's not found in Jersey cow or Southern European cow milk. But A2 is like our mom. And most people don't have an issue with that, especially if it's raw. And food can be a poison or a medicine. And there's no doubt about that. And so same thing with dairy. It can be a poison or a medicine. I think it's a superfood when you find the right thing for your body. Get Real Milk, I would say, for the dairy, getrealmilk.com. there are a number of people that I've had on the podcast that are starting new things. They're not out yet, but they're going to be able to connect people to every farm in their area.
Oh,
And
yeah.
they're not going to rank them, but they'll say, you know, what kind of animals they have, how they raise them, what they feed them. So you can determine for yourself if I want corn-fed pigs on a small lot, or if I want free range, 100% grass-fed, grass-finished beef, you can make that decision for yourself.
Yeah.
And so those things are on the horizon nearby. But if you go to a farmer's market, you can meet people in your area. That's what we did. That's how we found out about Rome Ranch. And when we went out there, it was 90 minutes west, and we became buddies with those guys long before we started regenerative agriculture. And they were a deep influence on us. And they actually connected us to the guy who we get all of our sheep from, who does the exact same practices, but he works with goat and sheep. So I think that's another piece is build that connection. Even if you just go to the farmer's market and meet the people selling the stuff, you know, you start to build that relationship with them. And then third, even if you live in a fucking apartment, grow something on your porch. You can grow something there. You can get a planter, you know, like a big planter. You can add organic. There's a company called MicroLife that makes really good organic amendments for natural fertilizers for that. And you could have a tree that produces quite a bit. That can start your relationship, even in a fucking apartment, you know, or on a tenth of an acre. There's no excuse not to put something in the ground and start a relationship with nature. And from that, you know, you reap what you sow. You could just start to see like, oh, is my tree have fungus on it? What's going on? And you got to research that and you got to fix it. You got to heal it. Tending to something else connects you to the all consciousness. It pulls you away from me, my mind thinking, because now you have to take care of something.
I love that. So it's true, right? We are, our food has energy, you know, and what we put into our bodies is making us sick or making us well. And I think it is where we're going. And it's certainly something that we all should be mindful of. And I just appreciate your knowledge and all that you're creating. I get most of my information from you, and I can tell like you feel crappy when you're eating crappy. Like there's a reason for that. You know, for brain fog, for exhaustion, for all those things. Like that is not how we are meant to function in the world. So I just appreciate your like your motivation to figure this out and to teach people that it is absolutely possible. So mentally fit, spiritually fit, emotionally fit, physically fit, all of the fit is 100% available to you and possible. And I just thank you so much for all the work that you continue to do and the love that you pour into everything that you do, so that we can really, you know, see what's possible in this next, who knows, 5-6 decades.
Well, I love you, buddy. Thank you so much for the great questions, and thank you for having me on.
This was awesome, Kyle. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thanks, everyone, for staying to the end of the episode. As you can see, Kyle Kingsbury is a wealth of knowledge and the model of the masculine that we want to see leading this earth in this next phase of our expansion. So if you want to continue to learn more about yourself, to become mentally fit, physically fit, emotionally fit, financially fit, not only subscribe to his channel, but check out Fit for Service, because they have amazing programs running right now for you to do that inner work so that you can follow the call of your soul and fulfill your divine destiny. And don't forget to tune in for the next episode, because every single one is going to be just like this. Thanks again for listening, and I cannot wait to deliver more valuable information and content your way.